You still have panel channel on
We
there.
still have panel
Don't
channel.
worry
Just so
about it.
people know, we got obsessed with the phrase panel channel when we named our group in Discord, and that kind of stuck. So
Yeah.
panel channel.
And we never bothered to edit it out.
Glad you're all here. I see there's a few friendly faces coming right through. I'm going to go deliver some cards. You can handle the rest.
Oh,
Wow.
I'm going to handle the rest.
The one with the sore throat.
No, yeah, well, I mean, there's 4 of us. You don't have to do
Somebody
it
else
all.
take on with it.
Yeah, you want to take over?
So. Oh, we could just introduce.
Well, first of all, that, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm OMG Floofy. I am the web administrator for the sites on Asterior.net, including Endless History. As it says there, I've done interviews and translated financial reports and other information on Falcom.
I suppose I am Ribos. I run a Discord server and stuff. I don't know. I'm a fan of Falcom since like 2015. I don't know. I like their music.
Okay. My name is Mr. JRPG. I'm just some JRPG and video game enthusiast. And I'm also the guy for this panel that provided a chunk of the soundtrack music samplings that you'll be hearing throughout the presentation.
I'm Bumpmaster. I'm pretty active in the community. I collect a lot of Falcom games and soundtracks, and I was kind of like the glue keeping us together and organizing meetings and stuff.
Hence panel channel.
I'm Leon. You may call me Pascon Deacon. I'm an enthusiast of
Mike.
old school Japanese PC games, but especially Falcom.
That one's not working.
Is your mic working?
It is. It's just
Yeah.
weak.
Okay.
All right. And when the mic's working, I'm very exuberant and happy to describe all manner
you
of
just have to
awesome
be
Falcom
closer.
music. I actually run and own the Falcom music spreadsheet, which we'll get to in a bit further down the panel. And I think we're ready to get going.
All right. So we're gonna see all this here in a bit, but there we go. As it says here, we're going to be focusing on the in-game music specifically, rather than a lot of the remixes and stuff. But we will talk about it. We don't have a lot of length of sampling, but you were given a card. This card has a QR code. At the end of the panel, we're going to be making a playlist available that will actually contain every single song that we have in the panel, even if we don't get to them. So you don't want to forget. You want to get a card on the way out. Obviously, we can't represent every game. We can't represent every version because that's kind of hard to do with a company that's over 30 years old.
Yeah, and remember, this is with all the songs we provided. This is not an objective, factual list of the best Falcom music or anything, because music tastes are very subjective.
And also, I think there's around 5,000 tracks between in-game OSTs and arrangements. They've been around for a while.
Right.
They've seen the dissolution of multiple record companies. They've seen many staff members come and go who made or arranged the music. There is a long litany of things that we could go into. We just had to kill our darlings and say, okay, this will do it. Right?
All right, so what is Falcom? Let me hand that off to someone else.
So I realize this is the panel slide from last year, but we like it so much we're going to keep it. So, and some people bring up the question, is Falcom indie? Well, Falcom is certainly old. They're from a time when they didn't worry about terms like indie or homebrew or ground up. It was simply it was taken for granted that if you could go into a computer shop and sell your game to the proprietor, you could put a game out on a PC or an early console. And that's how Falcom started, as a computer shop that became a studio creative output and eventually a titan in their own industry and market. So these days, you might recognize some of these games. At top left, Ys, Oakenfilgana, Zwei, the Argus Adventure at top right, Guramine at bottom left, and Tokyo Xanadu at bottom right. Just kind of an overview of more than the last decade of the games they've put out in varying genres, usually sticking to action RPGs in particular, though.
There you go.
Where do we begin? I want to pass this off to someone.
Making the person with the sore throat do it.
Yeah.
Fair.
So Falcom's music, basically, what is it all about? They have a very melodic focus, lots of interconnected themes, as it says here. many genres and moods. It's actually interesting because I was going to bring up one thing that's actually really fun is if you like to study musical composition and so forth and are interested in it, you should look up through their library if you're interested in the concept of leitmotifs. They use them a lot in Trails in the Sky as an example, and we'll go through, and a lot of times the music will end up telling a story that hasn't been totally revealed yet. So it's a really neat concept with how they do with that. So they have that focus to use melodies to help add to the story of what they're trying to tell.
Shall we provide some samplings just to kind of give a taste of what they're about?
Sure.
Okay,
Now the question is, can you
All right?
navigate it
What do we
while...
want to give a sample from?
let's go from the very beginning. Yes,
Not quite the very beginning, but near the start.
yeah.
Back in 1986, the music capabilities they had on early Japanese PCs weren't entirely up to snuff, but they still knew how to put out a good piano track.
Okay.
What do you want to?
And another one.
Yeah. Let's go talk with the East a little bit. A series that most of us are familiar with, probably.
Which one?
East PC 88. We'll go in order. Okay, so I want to show this song. This is the very first song you'd hear in the East series back in 1987, Fina, the title theme.
Yeah, I mean...
Okay, so with East, it got ported to a few platforms.
I know. I'm trying to find the slide that you were trying to bring up.
Okay, just click on the next one after the Fina one. Sorry, slight technical difficulties.
Go back to the playlist icon.
What?
Go back to the
Playlist icon.
To the...
Playlist, yeah. Click on East,
PC88.
and then click after Fina. That's weird. Oh, there we go. So yeah, it got ported over to a few platforms, a bunch of Japanese PCs, several versions from different games on the Windows PCs, and of course the consoles and the handhelds ranging from the NES to the Nintendo DS and PSP. And with each of these versions, the Song of Fina sounds slightly different from one another, due to different sound trips, hardware, and so on. And on top of all that, click on the next slide. We have a bunch of different, vocal and instrumental arrangements of Fina that's been going on since the 80s and even as far as 2013. There's a lot of Fina, and this is just one of the many songs that, Falcom ported over, rearranged, and have special versions of.
they have a lot of arrangements.
They have a lot of versions.
Too many. You could say Fina is to the Japanese action RPG what the Super Mario Brothers theme is to platformer music as well. It's so ubiquitous and so commonly arranged, even amongst fan artists, doujin artists in Japan, and official artists, that it's gained this reputation.
All right.
And we can go back.
Yeah, go back to the main table, and just go to the slide.
There we go.
So there is the question, of course, what sounds good on an album and what sounds great in game? Can you do both? We feel personally that, differently, that Falcom music achieves both of these in various degrees. There's a lot of music I like to listen to just when I'm studying or doing all kinds of work, just because it's Falcom music. I know what to expect, but it can surprise me sometimes as well. It keeps my interest even when I'm not playing the game.
Okay. And then what makes Falcom music so special? Well, for starters, it's super catchy. They have a great variety of styles and instrumentations, great sense of pacing, no matter how slongs they are, and they utilize all sorts of technologies, different synthesizers, MIDIs, and of course the live instrumental stuff. And I threw in a little link at the very last minute if it's possible to kind of show it. Sorry for the lack of embeddation. There's a little surprise in the link where once upon a time, they made a music video back in the 80s. the whole rock and roll style of one of the iconic East themes to make the end of battle.
I love that intro too.
承知いたしました。
This is another very commonly arranged song. It's the main theme for East too.
There are many versions of To Make the End of Battle. This is just one version of it.
There's even a reference to it in Gurman because there's a song there called To Make the End of Digging.
Now, on that note, this is at least a decade, almost decade and a half, separated from Gurman. That brings us to the wide lineup of people who made music at Falcom. So, I should explain a bit. In fact, I'll let Fluffy explain something about Falcom's crediting for musicians.
Falcom has a policy that they've lined with, and you're going to notice it a lot, that we have a... we're going to be talking about this in the spreadsheet when we get to it with PASACon. Falcom has a current policy where to try to keep any one person from standing out, because they have like the idea that it takes a village, in a sense, that to actually create a game, that everybody is involved. So there's a big belief that everybody is Falcom. Everybody is under Falcom in a sense. And that's why you have only Kondo doing all the speaking, because he is considered a representative president. His full title is Board Selected Representative President. So it means that their board of directors basically voted him in to be the person, to be the mouthpiece for the company. And at that point, and he speaks for Falcom, he speaks for the company specifically. And the reason that they do that is to try to keep any one person from like being a celebrity, and trying to make sure that that a lot of the hard work from other people in the company doesn't just get thrown aside in lieu of the celebrity status one person may have.
You may notice, on the other hand, that we have Yuzo Koshiro at the bottom left, followed by one of the current directors of Falcom, a co-worker of his time, Mieko Ishikawa, who also composed a lot of music for their early PC games. At right, we have arranger Yukihiro Jindo, who has been, by and large, responsible for defining the modern Falcom arranged sound. He arranged a lot of music starting for Falcom right around the time of E6, going forth up until now.
Okay. And shall we provide more samples?
All right, what do you
Let's
want?
go.
Okay.
Speaking of Yuzo Koshiro, we have Legacy of the Wizard. That kind of music was increasingly typical on the Famicom at that point. You have a basic little square, flat drum. You have the top three. You have the other three voices used for melody and accompaniment. And on the MSX2, where this, excuse you, on the MSX2, where you had less voices for your music, this was an upgrade to go from that chip to a more advanced NES sound chip, which Koshiro took advantage of, for example.
And let's go take a look at the Sorcery stuff for a moment, too. Yeah. So,
Why don't we play one more from Sorcery? What's interesting is that the first track you heard from Sorcery was composed by Yuzo Koshiro. The second one we just played by Mieko Ishikawa. They both got a lot faster. Even the music you heard before, still not particularly high-paced, not particularly well-suited for the kind of action you would expect from these games. But now with Sorcery, it starts to change.
Yeah, and just one quick note. It's like those both games we were sampling were both in 1987, but you could see how the hardware difference can, bring out a huge difference in sound qualities and all that sort of things.
Go back.
And
Yeah.
back to the slide.
And there's going to be a lot of mentions of a group called JDK Band. That's their sound team. But what exactly does JDK Band stand for?
To clarify, Sound Team JDK is the internal name for Falcom Sound Team. JDK Band is a freelance organization working with that sound team.
あれは教えてもらえないんですよ名前を付けたのは創業者の今の加藤会長なんですけれど、聞いたらなんか知らない方がいいこともあるとか言われました株主総会でも質問されたんですけれど僕も答えられないんですよよくスタッフが冗談でジャストディレクテッドバイカットみたいな
So even Kondo doesn't know.
One of our running jokes is JDK stands for just don't know. We just don't know.
Yeah.
There's also Jumping Dynamite Kids from one of the early album liner notes, which is a theoretical name. We're not sure, though. So, Nate.
Yeah, so how does one get into the Falcom music? Well, the easiest way is play the games, right?
Play Xanadu next.
Yes, Xanadu Next is a game that they've produced and it has Falcom music in it. So there are many other choices. I mean, for example, recently there's in the last 5 or 8 years or so, they've been mostly just consoles, only consoles, but like PS4 and before that PS Vita and PSP. But before that, they made mostly Windows PC for a decade or two. So their games were all there. But then you could also play the many ports by different publishers. And there are many places to start. There's many series. There's East, there's Trails, there's Zwei and Xanadu Next.
Also by Zwei 2.
Oh, yes, Zwei 2.
It needs more love.
Zwei 2.
Zwei 2 needs more love.
Yeah.
It
really
really
does.
does. It has an excellent soundtrack, an excellent story. Gameplay is great.
Sadly,
Sorry.
Zwei 2 is the game that made them have to drop PC development. The game is actually on record as one of the worst-selling PC games in Japan in history.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's kind of why they've had to abandon and quickly go to PSP only.
I'm
And
feeling
that's-
sad,
and
guys. We should
from
play
there
some
they
Zwei
went
2
to Vita.
music.
yeah,
Yes.
we should. If I could just actually.
Let's give it a little,
Sample some Zwei 2.
and a little bit of Zwei 1 as well.
Sample some music.
No, don't do that.
None of these are sampling the music. There you go.
Yeah, Zwei is middle on the top.
Oh, yeah,
Second
there
from
it
the top.
is. All right.
We got Zwei and Zwei 2 here.
Yeah, these are two different games in different eras of the music. But they're also very unique. What's going on with that menu?
I don't know.
Let's do Serpentina.
Yeah, and this is, 10 years later? 8 years later? Zwei to Zwei 2?
Shit, sorry.
Well, we went that.
Needs more love.
And Zwei in particular is an action RPG where you control two characters, hence the name Zwei. And
I would actually go to say that Tokyo Xanadu is almost a spiritual successor to it in a sense of the way it plays.
And there is one other game that I probably would mention that's sort of go to Nayuta no Kiseki for a moment.
Oh yeah, who would forget
Back to
that?
the
That's
playlist.
also a kind
Playlist
of
icon.
spiritual in
Let
gameplay.
me try something here. Maybe this will help with the situation on this.
Yeah.
We will. Yay, now I can actually do this. That's what's going on.
And now all of your tabs will be visible.
Yes.
I don't know what's happening with it. But whatever.
It's worth noting that the very first Zwei from 2000 was directed by Masayuki Kato, just rolling off of Kondo's explanation of why Kato is so secretive and so elusive at times. Well, he had a role in keeping the company that he founded together, and Zwei was a game that brought them back to making original Falcom games at the start of the millennium.
Yeah,
Okay.
around 2001.
Okay, so with why Nayuta no Kiseki in particular, even though it carries the Kiseki/Trails name, in secret it's actually a Y3. And it has a really good soundtrack with a lot of varied themes. And personally, I like the dungeon themes the most, such as the top one, Coral Reef.
Yeah, I know Floofy's a fan of the battle theme. I mean, yeah, boss theme.
You start to hear the neoclassical influences in these later Falcom tracks. We'll get to that in a bit. But you also have tracks like A Surge of Impatience, which diverge from that.
Oh, crap, that was...
Oh.
What happened? There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm trying to do
Sneak
full
peek.
screen on this and it didn't play well.
Don't you wish we had an English version of Nayuta no Kiseki? There is a fan translation, albeit
Sort of.
sort of.
Sort of. I don't. We don't talk about that. Yeah, you should definitely play this wisely.
You can buy. You can get them
They are
both on
Steam.
Steam. Random shout
Yeah.
out to the
But-
fact that they're available on Steam.
Anyway, I mean, yes, a lot of the going back to the where to get into Falcom. Yes, that is a thing. You can. A lot of these games were. A lot of the Windows catalog was ported to PC. I mean, ported to Steam and stuff, and GOG and
Right.
Humble, and even some of their console games from more recent, like Cold Steel and Issei, have all gone to Steam. You know. Then there's like, of course, there's games from a long time ago. You could, I guess, see if you can grab, and then, you know, like PC 98, PC 88. You know,
There are-
and those were all ported to things like the NES, SNES. You
There's
know?
actually a site that does what they call Project Egg, and they have like Windows-based emulators that can play PC 88 and PC 98 games, and they're all legal. They're all totally legal. You can buy the game, and it comes packaged in a little window type setup where it simulates running a disc game. And so, I mean, that's one way you can go about it as well. And those are available through. I can't remember the name of the site though. But if you look up Project Egg, you'll probably find it, and it's Egg, EGG, all in caps.
Okay. So,
So another way you can actually get into their music is just buy the music. Falcom mail order. A lot of people don't realize that Falcom will actually ship internationally. And it's a slightly different process, and it's much better now than it was a few years ago, where you actually had to reach out to them by email and transfer all your payment info to them by email.
and I believe that goes for both games and
Yeah, for
that's
games,
how I got
music, most goods on there.
arranged albums.
There are some goods that they don't have the ability to actually sell outside of Japan, and so they usually stay on the site if they can or not. I have on Endless History, the link there, I actually have an FAQ posted that actually talks about how to order from them. So if that's ever an issue, it's right there on the front of the page.
But before they changed it, sending the payment and other info through email. That's how I got a lot of my collection. So it works.
And Nate, why don't you tell us about Amazon Music, iTunes, Spotify?
Yes.
Speaking of Spotify,
Yes. On the next slide, you can stream the music instead. You can listen to it via those services. You can also buy it through Amazon and iTunes and listen and download it, as you would. And there's also like more.jp for buying it on the previous slide, but in like high quality, what was it, 24?
Yes.
The music nerds would know.
48.1 kilohertz, FLAC quality, even I think WAV file quality versions of those soundtracks are available from these sites. Should also note that Falcom Music Channel on YouTube has a lot of these tracks and more to stream.
Oh yeah, but hold on. Falcom Music Channel, that's on YouTube. None of these were, that's for free, isn't it?
Wait, we got this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are, where is this?
you just missed.
You were on it.
You're on
that
it.
was it. So Falcom actually has a very interesting policy
Yeah.
for their music.
I mean, you probably don't have to read it all, but she's going to explain it.
So basically, the gist of it is, as long as it's not a video game, and if you're not making a profit off of it, or the person getting to hear it has to pay to hear it, you can use Falcom's music in anything you want. As long as you do the proper copyright attribution that's on there on number 3. It is, you can see the prohibited uses there. Basically, they have I think one of the examples I see on their site under their usage cases is that they actually had it on a commercial. Some company used it in a commercial on broadcast TV. Now, as a good example, you can't use it in like cable television because you have to pay to hear it at that point. But say, like if you do something like if you have like a school project, as long as you put the proper attribution to it, it's okay. If you want to play it play one of their songs at a free concert, it's okay. If you want to do something on YouTube with some of their music, it's okay. They are very, very, very open with it and I love that their whole reason for it is everybody loves Falcom music.
And if you listen to their music, maybe you'll play their games and buy some stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. Essentially, you don't have to pay royalties to them if you use their music. That's what this all means.
If you want to use it in a case where you have to actually have a paid access, you
Like if you're making something,
So.
If you have any questions about the free
And
music
selling
use
it.
policy and other things, we're going to take that at the end of the panel. We got a lot of samples to go through. Let's go some samples going right now, actually.
Okay.
All right.
You were mentioning earlier about a lot of the platforms, Ribos. There was one in particular platform I would like to mention that I have sort of a slight bias. The Turbo CD/PC Engine stuff. So I'd like to start with the East Book 1 and 2. So yeah. With the one thing, So with the Turbo CD, they use something called the Red Book Audio. And this audio has, really high quality synthesizing stuff. And a lot of these songs are rearranged by one of the arrangers, Ryo Yonemitsu, who's prevalent in the Turbo CD stuff. He does, in my opinion, really excellent usage of drum and synthesizers, like with the Runes of Mandaria we heard for a moment. And I'd like to also show the Subterranean Canal.
That track is what got me into East music, actually. This was even before I really knew what Falcom was. I just knew, East. I'm on Galbadia Hotel. Let's just put this into the next tab. Oh, that sounds pretty cool. I gotta check that out one day.
And if you allow me to gush a little bit more about the Turbo CD here, let's go to The Legend of Heroes right below it. So this is the very first game in the Legend of Heroes line, which later turns into the Trails/Gaseki series. And again, more Turbo CD music goodness I'd like to share. Start with the field theme.
At this point in the history of console games, arrangers such as Ryo Yonemitsu were getting contracted to do various arrangement works by companies like Falcom, or also Capcom, Konami, Sega, and the list goes on. And so you get music from a wide array of arrangers at this point. It's just that Yonemitsu's style really stood out and was easy to translate to CD game releases of early Falcom titles.
And a little fun fact, with the Turbo CD games, you could actually use the games in CD players and you could hear the music, if I recall.
Let's get back to some of the discussion.
What?
Let's go back to some of the discussion.
All right.
Yeah, I don't think you need to tell everybody that.
Just like- All right.
Okay.
Here we go. That's for.
So why don't we bring up the URL to the Falcom music spreadsheet?
Wait, let me.
Yeah.
Easy enough
in
to find.
speaker notes?
Yeah.
Where is
You
it?
could just look that up.
Okay.
You
We
probably
have it on
don't.
the Discord. Do you want to just grab it from there?
If you do that,
Yeah.
you're gonna have it on screen.
Bob?
What we're about to show you is a very special fan project that a few very big Falcom music enthusiasts have put together.
Yeah.
One of them, one of our panelists, Pasicon here, has some involvement in the project.
No, it's not pinned.
No. No.
It should be
Okay.
pinned in Falcom
Okay.
Music. What?
One moment, guys. Sorry.
Are you really googling it?
Come on, boy, come on.
There we are.
Oh boy, where do we start with this?
You should have brought your mic.
If you look up on Google Falcom Composer Breakdown, you will see that despite Falcom's own official policy of not crediting per track on a per track basis who works at Sound Team JDK, who does the music, who does the Falcom music, arrangements and compositions and all, if you go to another tab, let's just select any of the bottom tabs from one of the earlier games.
Which ones?
Any of the bottom tabs from
Your pick, Floofy.
Yeah.
What?
Any of the earlier games. Just
This is a mountain of a spreadsheet that just goes through the entire history of Falcom game music as composed by Sound Team JDK. Me, Joseph, Preda, various other people involved in the online Falcom community have slowly but surely pieced together a series of information leaks, guessing, corroborated by leaks, and what you get are as close to official credits as one could possibly get. We take it for granted based on albums released by Square and other companies that we'll know who did what. But that's not the case with Falcom, and it hasn't been up until very recently. So we know, for example, that Ishikawa did most of Popful Mail. That music you might have heard on Sega CD, that's hers. But if you go way later to, say, Xanadu Next,
This does not have every album or anything. This is just the songs and albums featured in the games themselves.
There we go.
now you see that so many of us are trying to figure this out that we have multiple sheets trying to guess who did which
Yeah,
track.
multiple columns. It's
This
like,
is the
I
tricky
don't know.
thing when
I
you
don't
don't
know,
have official
maybe
credits.
This one.
So, because we were just so bored and we don't have better things to do with our lives, this is what we ended up doing. But we have fully put out as complete a sheet as we can possibly hope to, and anyone who's really interested, just going in depth in Falcom music.
And you
this is-
recognize styles, you can absolutely go and contribute yourself if you.
Point is, this is one more way to appreciate the huge breadth and specific detail that goes into Falcom music, you could say.
Wow, you just did it.
Speaking of Falcom music, I want to hear some more.
All right. What do you want to do this time?
Anyone?
Let's try some Trails in the Sky.
I think people have heard of this game now, right?
Trails in the Sky was a huge exposure and building a huge world that would become what we know as Zemuria across all the different Trails games. But it led to interesting new music styles as seen in something like Overdosing Heavenly Bliss.
Before we do that, I do want to interrupt with the fact that we have a funny, with my comment on the leitmotifs bit earlier, we have a funny situation if you've ever played the Gagarv games, which have heavily influenced the Trails games.
The trilogy of
Wait,
Legend Heroes
stop.
games
We
before
must talk about
Trails.
Gagarv.
Yeah, we're going to do a
Yes.
quick interruption because we have a particular song that you guys, if you've just heard Silver Will, I'm sure that sounds a bit familiar.
Why is this happening, Floopy? What is Silverwell doing in a game before it? Did it time travel?
Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know. I think that's a game. That's a question for the game. Play the game.
Yeah. We'll go back over to Trails in the Sky now that we've done that little quick interruption.
Okay, and why don't you play Hummel for a moment?
Get those tissues out because
As you heard, this is a different variation of Silver Will, whereas, in Trails in the Sky first chapter, it was used as a very high battle theme, and then in the next game, it's used, the variant is used as a very emotional theme.
Yeah, we have time.
Yeah, and it was also used in other arrangements in SC2. I mean, it's a common theme, and that's just part of the reason why Falcom music is great.
We've been skipping ahead on discussion a bit. Why don't we go back to Gagcarve for a second and then move on?
Yeah. And I just want to make a quick mention with the Gagcarve stuff. There is one song in particular I feel you should share that, really diversifies how, varied Falcom's music is. Show with a Terrible Beast song.
Most hardcore song in ever.
best battle theme.
It is the Chronicles theme series.
A big thing with Cage Song of the Ocean is that when I played it a couple of years ago, I think my friends ended up naming it Shenanigans the Musical. And what's really
And the music fits.
what's really great though is that it has this huge. I think the best term I've ever heard for this is emotional whiplash. It starts out really funny. I mean, there's like a scene where they're trying to track down a couple of girls who got kidnapped, and then the thieves get scared away by a stampede of rats. and also very relevant to MAGFest is the main characters are all musicians trying to find a lost symphony. And so actually I had to add a bit of them playing music in the game. And there's like 12 to 15 tracks in the soundtrack that is actually played by the characters.
In the story of the game.
Yeah. And one of the best parts in the game is that if you go into a town and there's a stage, you can actually go and perform on the stage for extra scenes. So you'll actually...
That is a very musical game.
It's... The Gagarv Trilogy is
need to
great,
stack this
and
high.
they're just phenomenal games, and you can see where they actually set the trail for Trails in the Sky.
I get it.
You could
Trailblazing, there we go.
you could actually play the Gagcarve trilogy. Well, sort of, kind of. Like the PC versions are Japan only, but it did get ported over by Namco for the PSP.
And that was a bit controversial, but, it exists.
Bad localizations are controversial for us.
Yeah, a bit. I mean, it is a meme-worthy localization that kind of is well known for that.
I haven't eaten an unusual today.
Thank you for that.
So
Very,
fan arrangements.
insightful.
Oh, fan arrangements, there we are.
At the left, that image is of a Dojin album featuring a number of Falcom remixes. One at the end is actually a version of the Trails of the Sky theme, the main leitmotif, vocally sung. Vocally sung, that's redundant.
What?
And at the right is the usual, as the Genesis Beyond the Beginning remix from the track of East Origin in a super heavy power metal-ish style. I particularly like the image, but it's also a really good remix by Stone McNuckle. In general, there's a big variety and range of arrangements for Falcom music across the world especially. So you get a lot of arrangements out of Japan, but you see more and more people in the Anglosphere and just outside adjacent who are getting into Falcom music and saying, hey, this is really cool stuff. I could make another Mega Man 2 remix, or we could do some of this as well.
I mean, another thing is, I think some of the more famous ones is like there's a Japanese violinist known as the Screamer, and he wears like a scream mask. And I see somebody here, and he does a lot of Falcom arrangements as well. So
Yeah,
you'll find them
on YouTube, right?
On YouTube, yeah. You
Yeah,
can
he
find
just does
people
them
on
on
YouTube all over the place as well.
I realize that we are not all musicians here, but where is our Falcom music at MAGFest?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Where are they?
Yeah, we need someone to go out there and who is good at instruments and arrangements and I don't know.
Well, I mean,
vocals
I
even.
did when I got to talk to Mariachi Entertainment System. I've said you have to play some Falcom music sometime.
Oh yeah, they are amazing.
They were good.
Or
Yes, this panel is not about mariachi.
okay. So, or even better, just drag JDK Band to perform at MAGFest.
Oh yeah, that'd
Wouldn't
be
that
the
be
day.
awesome?
But I
That'd be
mean,
quite something.
That would be expensive.
Let's
Now
get
we're
to some more music.
Yeah.
All
right.
Pretty exciting.
What do we
So-
want to play?
Let's look at some oldies. How about East 5,
Oh yes, East 5.
which is not here?
For some reason, you were the one that made the list.
I know where it is.
That's
Yeah.
impressive.
There we are.
Okay, so I feel like I want to say
Thank
stuff
you.
about East. I want to feel like I want to say stuff about East 5. So we were talking a bit about the Turbo
Don't worry,
CD
it's on the
stuff
playlist.
earlier, and you have those rockin' synthesized beats, this fast-paced, hardcore tunes. But eventually, they had to move on from the PC engine, and then they delved into the Super Nintendo. The thing about East 5 is it's a controversial game. It's considered the major black sheep of the series. It's slower paced, and for a series known for its hardcore music, like I mentioned, the East 5's musical style went in the much more slower paced symphonic orchestral route, which in retrospect does sound nice. It's just a far cry departure from what the series is known for. But let's give it some love.
Let's break into territory. Either works.
Apparently you do.
But it does have some faster paced music like The Wilderness.
I want to add in that even though it's a black sheep, there are some people out there that really love it, like me. So it's actually a cool game.
And it really needs a remake, the Falgana
Yes.
and Memories of Cell-Sida style remake.
Yeah.
It's
Well, one
also
of
worth noting, East 5 was the first game where Falcom used internally MIDI tracking and arrangement for the music heard in game. They had moved away from FM synth to make MIDI. What does FM synth really sound like for late Falcom at that period? Let's go to Brandish 3. I wish there was a Brandish 5.
The Brandish 5. Whoa, hold on. You're making some history.
Brandish 5 would be awesome.
That's one of my personal favorites from one of my personal favorite Falcom soundtracks. It's at a period in the company's history where they had refined their games, their style, and they had figured out just the right kind of moods that they could capture within a very grim dungeon crawler that they wouldn't make today, to be
Oh yeah,
honest.
but they
kinda
did
do.
make Brandish TDR, which you can play in English. So
Brandish the Dark Revenant, the remake of the first game on
if
PSP.
everyone here goes and buys it, and maybe everyone else too, maybe we will get a Brandish 5.
Or maybe we'll actually see TDR ported to PC.
Oh, that would be nice.
That would be lovely.
That would be better.
That would be amazing.
That would be also good.
Yes.
Do both.
Yes, please. Both is good.
I think we still have some discussion
Why not
slides.
both?
Oh, not that many actually.
Yeah, I think it's mostly just that.
It's mostly just
And-
music at this
hey,
point.
we
Yeah.
Speaking
Post
of
some
Brandish
samples.
music,
And
here's a
then-
little cool factoid. I don't know if y'all knew. If y'all are familiar with Undertale and Megalovania, Toby Fox actually said that Megalovania was heavily inspired by the final boss theme of Brandish 2 in terms of chord progression and notes and all that. So, cool little
take
fact.
a look. Wait, was that in there?
No, we don't have it in there.
You didn't?
Yeah. Sadly, no Brandish 2 samplings.
I mean, you could add it to the playlist as a bonus track.
Yeah, we could. We could add it to the playlist later.
Now I need time travel. Gotta go back and fix that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like there's so many good Falcom music. There's stuff even we didn't think of it until literally right now.
I have an interesting proposition. Each of us will propose one sample slide we want to choose, and then we will take a show of hands on where to start. I, for example, would like to go to East Origin. Henry.
Come back to me.
All right. Dennis.
Let's see. Let's go with Xanadu next.
That's East Origin and Xanadu next. Ribos, anything you want to go to?
I should probably go back to my. There is a certain thing, Crossbell.
Did you say Crossbell?
Did you say Crossbell?
I'll take Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles for 500.
Let's do. I will throw in Star Trader.
Okay, so that would be, let's take a raise of hands. Who wants to see East Origin? Who would like to see Xanadu next? Okay. Who would like to see East 1 and 2 Chronicles? Who would like to see Trails to Zero? Trails from Zero.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
And Fubu's
I mean, it's either way.
Star Trader.
Star Trader.
Depends
Let's
on
do
your
Star Trader.
translation.
That's more than Xanadu
You know what? I think we have time to do clips from all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we should.
Yeah.
Let's start with Star Trader because that's a
That's a
Yeah,
very,
that one's
very
iconic.
iconic song that we've got here.
And we
Yes.
should probably mention it.
Just surprised we didn't, just show it from the get-go.
We can't play the rest of the song with this sample, but you should listen to it. It has amazingly English vocals from one of the earliest arrangers for Falcom music, Kishimoto, T. Kishimoto, who was a vocalist in heavy metal bands at the time before working for Falcom, which is why it sounds so awesome.
Oh.
Then we'll go to Trails from Zero.
All right.
And we got quite a few songs there.
Yeah, you got a bunch of samples you can choose from. There are a lot of good tracks in this game.
So,
Oh, that's a good one.
that is a good one. There's
Yeah.
there's not there
I
not there are
don't
not
know.
any bad tracks in Crossbell.
Yep.
What do you want to play?
Well, I mean, there's the. What are you doing?
There's a patch with a certain name on it.
Change this thing. I mean, what did you say?
No, there's a certain fan translation patch that has a name with a certain name, something Geofront.
Ah, yeah, you could just play the Geofront theme. That's well known. That was even found in Skill 2 data. Yeah, get over there. And there's this kind of like more intense one, but then there's also things like Afternoon and Crossbow. The elevator music.
It's perfect for walking around in the city talking to NPCs all day.
Yes.
Yeah, the Trails experience.
So I do want to say that Mystic Core and Azure is actually one of my favorite Falcom songs.
Oh yes, Azure has two
Yeah.
very good ones. Both of them.
Some of this might sound familiar to anyone who just heard 99 seconds.
Oh yeah, Azure sounds a lot like Panico. It's
Yeah.
a very similar era.
And let's
as well.
do a little snippet of Azure Arbitrator for a moment. One of the
Just a
iconic.
bit, just a bit.
Yeah, this
a
one
bit.
is-
The song is only a few seconds, but it's over 8 minutes long. It's hard to give it justice on
Yeah.
this song, but I really wanted to show it in some case or form.
How did Demon Vesper
After
not
that,
get
we
on
had
here if
East
you're
1 and
talking
2
about long songs?
Chronicles. I believe that got the most show of hands after 0.
There it is. All right.
Which I only have one sample of because there's many versions of East 1 and 2. Chronicles is just the latest version of the East 1 and 2 ports. And I wanted to showcase this song in particular, mostly because I wanted to show this is one of the songs where, you know, Falcom can get really, really metal.
The previous iteration of the JDK Band would actually play this too. It was just a live version of it was awesome.
Good stuff. I believe after that, we had East Origin, since we're on an East kick.
Which one do you want?
Oh yeah,
Where to
they
begin? I think we should do Silent Desert.
Yes, I love that.
pretty
You also
cool.
get some even more intense stuff like Scars of the Divine Wing, which plays during boss fights. All right, I think we have time for another set of show of hands. Well, let's play some Xanadu next just to get that out of the way.
Yeah, let's go with something a little
How can you
slower
not
than
talk
Xanadu
about
next
Xanadu
stuff.
Next with Pasocon on the
Tretche Woods.
table. Stick all three.
Xanadu Next gets a lot of Zelda comparisons, but this reminds me almost more of late Square music from the time, such as from games like Vagrant Story or Saga Frontier and so forth.
And with Xanadu Next, it conveys a much more atmospheric soundtrack. The song in the top is a prime example of that. Eternal Maze.
Spoopy.
I would actually say, since it just got brought up, if you enjoyed Vagrant Story, you'd probably really like Xanadu Next.
It's true. It's a very accessible dungeon crawler, one of my
Yeah.
faves. So, let's do the show of hands again. Go back to the music playlist. I'm going to pick from this. Let's go with Tokyo Xanadu.
Okay.
It's a good one.
And anything.
In terms of soundtrack, it's pretty good.
Dennis, what would you want to go to next?
Maybe let's give Gurman some love.
Oh, yes.
Right. Anything, Rebos? Fubi?
East 8.
East 8?
Can I pull up one that we forgot to add in, but we have the clips for?
Sure.
East 9.
Oh, that was a noise.
So you did add that.
From the top, Tokyo Xanadu. Show of hands, please. Not bad, not bad. Yes. We got time for just, we're going to take the top two, and then we're going to do Q&A. And then, Dennis, that was
Gurman.
Gurumi.
Oh.
was East 8.
Yeah.
East 8? That came out just recently on Switch. No, it's popular. Okay.
Yeah,
9,
perfect for
East
Switch.
9.
Oh, dang. We're starting with East 9.
Cold Steel 3 is
Alright.
also
They want to
going
see.
Switch.
They want a
It's
snippet of
perfect.
the newest Falcom game.
I
Way
don't
at the
actually
bottom.
have track names for these, but they should be the last two, I think. Aren't
Yeah.
they?
Yeah.
Go to the last slide.
Yeah, my favorite.
Because I don't think we have anything
Numbers.
for it on the last slide.
Yeah.
Actually, I can do a quick way to see which ones are which. Ta-da!
Yeah.
Oh, they were sent 4. Oh, I didn't actually clip them. Never mind. I'm sorry.
Oh.
We couldn't actually. That's what it was. We couldn't figure out what we wanted. The whole soundtrack is really good.
Yeah, and I couldn't think of any good sampling times for
I do
some
have
song.
this,
We still have Ace 8.
Wait, I do have this though. Where is it?
Oh, yes, my favorite. Which application do you want to open it in?
This I became mildly obsessed with this song.
And it's actually kind of fitting since we're talking about Atmosphere and Xanadu next earlier.
I will say this. This is your game over music.
You're going to die a lot.
Is that what this is? Was that a threat?
Yeah. Like, East 9 has much more of a sort of a darker gothic vibe to it.
is. It's basically Falcom does Gothic, Falcom does almost Castlevania.
Yeah, and they also have some very interesting character designs. I hope it's
They're
localized
awesome.
eventually.
And it's thrown in elements of Assassin's Creed in it, too.
Yeah.
We got some East 8 stuff here, though. That's
All
for
right.
sure. Yeah, let's do some Sunshine. I'm
Yeah,
feeling
you
kind
can't
of
go
Yeah,
wrong.
this one is iconic C3 track. And it's very deep. Very, very deep. Yeah, that's great.
Oh, yeah. And this actually gives you really like, you just want to run around and hack and slash it.
As you do in the game.
We also had, I believe, we had Guramine. Let's get to that real quick.
So you heard To Make the End of Battle earlier. Here's a parody of it.
Leave it to Falcom to make fun of their own music. Because they would. One of the things that I have to comment with Falcom is they're extremely self-aware. They are extremely self-aware and make fun of their own tropes.
Yeah, and that was totally like Gurumin's theme in there. So
Yeah,
there you
they
go.
have Gurumin's theme in there done in the way of To Make the End of Battle.
We were going to talk about just briefly our favorite kinds of Falcon music, but we kind of just did that.
Yeah.
So we have time
like
for
the whole-
questions and answers and all that good stuff. You in the front, sir.
The question I was going to ask earlier is you're saying that I can use all of this music as background in video essays and not get copyright claim?
Absolutely.
As long as you're not selling it.
Yep. There you go.
Any hands?
Well, that's Patreon is different.
Well, that you still get. You don't have to actually pay to hear it, though. There you go.
I know normally you can't use it like that, but can you do it through like SoundDrop where you like remix like Falcon songs and then use SoundDrop or whatever, what that piece license is, the copyright owner
I mean,
I actually don't know.
The question he just asked is, can you remix Falcon music in a way based on the free music use policy, that lets you sell that music in another way later? It depends. Dojin albums at Comic Market in Japan, for example, commonly have Dojin musicians coming in and selling their remixes of Falcon music, and there's no legal action taken against them. Falcon has a cozy relationship with people who make a small penny off of that. They know that it's not competition for them anyway. Any other ones I can take out from the audience? Any real quick questions?
Yeah.
Nope.
Yes.
Oh, we got some.
you're gonna.
Trails to
crazy.
Azure, honestly.
I think recently my mind got changed with Cage Song of the Ocean.
I might have to pick Nayuta.
Zwei too.
Yeah, so many good ones. I'm probably going to go with, something not mentioned and underrated. East 4, Dawn of East is one of my favorites.
I will say for older Falcom music, I tend to separate the eras.
Or Zoe 1 is also
Brandish
good music.
3 is super, super, super good. If you're into FM synth music like I am, check that one out on streaming, however you want to do it.
Yeah, Brandish 3.
You, sir, in the green coat.
For your Trails Gold skill before, did you pick Synchronicity
No.
No.
We
This
pick
was
other
what
ones.
We had.
Oh, this was a Cold Steel 1 or 2.
Four.
Well, we could show you a little bit of what we picked. These. I did
You
put
actually- As a heads up, you absolutely cannot market Sin 4 without spoiling 3.
So I made a nice little disclaimer there.
Yeah.
I mean,
We
that's
are-
kind of the same with 1 and 2.
Right.
The
We are
cover
out
is
of
the
time,
same way.
unfortunately. I would love to
Ish.
answer more questions. We
Up
can
to.
do it right after, but we have to vacate the table.
Yep.
In due time.
Make
So,
sure-
thank you
make
all
sure
for
if
coming
you-
to the Falcom Music Panel today.
If you did not get a card, make sure you get one. Awesome.